We're still renovating. We've got a half-finished kitchen, but I just wanted to make a cooking video. My mum used to make apple pie when I was a kid, and this is the recipe she used. It's an old recipe from the Australian Women's Weekly, but if you Google this recipe right now, it comes up with a slightly different version, and I don't know why they changed it because this one's better. It's a perfect pastry for an apple pie, and the addition of custard powder in the pastry makes it delicious. Serve it with good cream, ice cream, or hot custard, and it's 5 minutes of happiness on a plate. And goodness knows we can all do with a little extra happiness in our lives. And this is how it goes. You'll need 1.5 kilos of green apples. Peel them and then cut them in half and then in quarters. Remove the core, and if they're large, chop them in half again, but if they're quite small apples, just leave them in quarters. Cut out any bad bits if there are any. Once your apples are all cut up, put them in a pot and add 1 teaspoon of finely grated lemon rind, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon powder, and 1/2 cup of water, 125 ml. And place this on your stove. Turn the heat on and bring it to a boil. And once the liquid, that 1/2 cup of water, comes to a boil, place the lid on and cook it for about 5 to 10 minutes until they're just tender but still holding their shape. Then drain them and set them aside to cool completely. And while they're cooling, we'll make the pastry. Simply into a bowl, put 1.5 cups of plain flour, 3/4 of a cup of self-raising flour, 1/3 a cup of cornstarch or corn flour, and 1/3 a cup of custard powder. Then into this bowl, we add 185 grams of cold diced butter, and using your fingertips, rub this into the flour mixture. And you could use a food processor and just blitz it a few times. But when you use a food processor, you can run the risk of it becoming a bit tough, the pastry. So I just like to use my fingertips, and it doesn't take too long. And once the butter's rubbed in, add 1 tablespoon of white sugar, 1 egg yolk, and save the white because that's what we're going to brush on top of the pie once it's formed. And just a little bit of cold water, like 1/3 a cup. We want to mix it to a firm dough, which is 80 ml. You might need a drop more of water, but not much. It should start to stick together. All custard powders and flours are slightly different. So if you find it's not coming together so good, just add a tiny, tiny bit more water like I am. And knead it just lightly until it forms a ball and comes together. Then wrap it in cling wrap and pop that in your fridge for 1 hour. So once the pastry's been in the fridge for an hour, remove it from the fridge and preheat your oven to 200 degrees fan forced or 220 without a fan, so a hot oven. And then we'll put the pie together. You'll need to lightly flour your workbench and sort of divide it into just over half of the dough, and we'll use that for the base. And I've got a 23 centimetre in diameter glass pie dish there. And just roll the pastry If you roll it around the rolling pin, it's easier to plop on the pie dish. I don't find it necessary to grease a glass pie dish, but if yours isn't glass or not non-stick, I would throw a little bit of butter around it. And that's the base. Now this is a really lovely addition to an apple pie. Take a couple of tablespoons of apricot jam, and I just loosen it up a little bit with a spoon, and then spread this jam over the base of the pie. Now at this point your apples should definitely be at least room temperature, if not cold, and put the apples on top of the jam. And as you can see, they've held their shape. Then get your remaining bit of pastry and roll that out. And it's really lovely pastry to work with. Now just before I pop the lid on, I like to get just a little bit of the liquid that was left over from the apples, just to moisten the top of the apples. Just a few tablespoons, not too much, because we don't want the pie to be soggy. Then take the rolled out pastry, again wrap it around the rolling pin, and slowly unravel it to cover the top. Oops, I forgot to do one thing. The egg white from the egg that we used in the pie, just whisk it slightly, and this is the glue. So put some on the underside of the pie before you put the pastry on top, or do it like I'm doing now. Now you really want to create a good seal on this, so press it down on top of the other piece of pastry underneath. Trim off any excess pastry, and then using floured hands I find helps a little bit. Crimp it together. I like to use my tooth thumbnails and my tooth thumbs, and just push it together. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's what's wonderful about home cooking. Too many pies and bought pies these days look perfect, and homemade never looks perfect. Just perfectly imperfect. And that's the pie, but we can decorate it now. So you can do some leaves or no decoration. My mum always did leaves. I'm not pressing down because I don't want to mark the bench. And a little circle in the middle. And to do the circle, I'll just grab a piece of dough, roll it into a ball, and stick it on with a bit of egg white. That'll do. With the remaining egg white, brush it well all over the pie, around the sides, over the decoration. And then sprinkle quite liberally with some white sugar, because the pie isn't that sweet, and this white sugar, as well as making it look pretty, because it will crystallize and sort of caramelize, it also adds that little bit of sweetness that's needed, especially seeing these apples are really tart. And the absolute last thing we do before it goes in the oven is get a sharp knife and just put a few slits in the pie, and this will allow the steam to escape. Now it goes in the hot oven that we've preheated for 20 minutes. Then after 20 minutes, reduce the temperature to 160 degrees Celsius with a fan or 180 without a fan, and cook it for another 20 to 25 minutes until it's really golden brown. And after the time's up, you've got a beautiful apple pie, and I'll let that cool down slightly before I slice a bit. The moment of truth. I think we can get probably 8 lovely slices from this pie. The pastry's definitely crispy. And the first bit is always the hardest to get out, but we'll give it a go. I left a bit of that bottom pastry on that one, but it looks good. And look at those big pieces of apples in there. And I'll see what Mike thinks. And this pastry here, I made exactly the same way, and it's gluten-free. So this recipe works gluten-free as well. The only problem is I didn't have quite enough apples, so I'm just going to make a few small little ones for me. What I did find with the gluten-free pastry is that you have to add a little bit more water to bring it together because the flour is more absorbent. And it doesn't roll out as easily. So the gluten-free pastry is more delicate. It will crack, but you can just patch it together. I just love apple pie. It's one of those things I miss, not being able to eat gluten. But this is pretty good. Little bit of apricot jam. Lots of apples. Tiny little bit of the reserved syrup. Now the reserved egg white. Just brush it around the edges before I put the lid on. Stick it together. And that one looks pregnant. It's fully loaded. I've only got enough apples for the 2 of them actually. And I won't worry about decoration for my little 2, but I will brush them with egg whites, and my brush is in the dishwasher right now. Some slits for the steam to escape and into the hot oven. And I'll come back when they're done, and this here I will freeze. So I ended up cooking these beautiful little gluten-free ones the same amount of time as the big one. And they smell amazing, just saying quietly. Yay. Look at all the apple in that, that's yum. That is so yum. Just a bit of a renovation update. We went to IKEA yesterday and picked up a bench for over there. I've been painting a few tiles. That's taken longer than I thought, but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. And we picked up everything we need to finish the reno. Now we just have to find time to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you again soon.